On this episode of Building Men, peeling back the layers and the ripple effect, an interview with my main man, Stephen Mathis. Welcome to the Building Men podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Meralda. Welcome to the Building Men podcast. My name is Dennis Meralda. Building Men is geared toward helping you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. It is my honor today to be joined by Stephen Mathis. Stephen is the host of the Holistic Alpha podcast. Stephen is a holistic men's health and wellness coach. He's been my mentor, my inspiration, my good friend for the last year and a half, and I'm so thrilled that you joined us today, Stephen. So welcome aboard the Building Men podcast today, brother.
Thanks, Dennis. So glad to be here, bro. It's great to finally be making this happen. So yeah, man, I'm super glad to be here with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. We've been talking about this for a while now, figuring out a way that you and I could get on to each other's podcast, just have an opportunity to just share our journey together. You and I, our journeys kind of intersected in December of 2019. It was actually on my birthday when we first chatted. I'll tell that story, but before we get into that, I just was hoping that you could just share a little bit about your journey. So you were an East Coast guy, and now you're out in Utah, and you went from kind of like a business background to now you're like this badass guy who's doing a million different things, helping a million people. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
All right, right on. We'll go the quick version. Yeah, I was born in Arizona. I grew up mostly in Connecticut from fourth grade till I graduated high school, and then came out to Utah to go to college and went to Utah State and met my now ex-wife there at Utah State. And she was from here in Salt Lake City. So we've been here ever since. So it's been about 21 years or so that I've been here in Utah. And yeah, like you said, I've gone on, I've had a variety of hats that I've sort of worn in my career. I started right out of school. I started working for Fidelity Investments. So I was a stock trader, basically executing clients' trades. So clients would call in with trades, and we were executing trades for them. And I moved through, a few different roles in that company, and that was pretty good. And along that time, I was just like in high school. In high school, I played pickup basketball. I didn't really play like any official sports, but I was playing pickup basketball every day and stayed like pretty active overall. But I didn't have particularly good health habits or anything like that. And then when I got out of school, went to college, and, at college, I'm like eating frozen pizzas and like, Totinos and Hot Pockets and like shit like that. That was just crap. And so my health just, and then eventually I started drinking, and my health just got worse and worse and worse. So in those years at Fidelity, I was just progressively getting more unhealthy. I was getting overweight. My mental health sucked. Every aspect of my health inside and outside was just getting worse and worse for the most part. And I tried to kind of do some things, and nothing ever really stuck. And then when my son was born, so my son was born in 2006. And when he was born, about 9 days after he was born, he had open heart surgery. And so he was in the ICU for about 3 months. So I took a leave from my Fidelity job to be with him during that time. And just something that was one of the biggest, couple of turning points in my life without question, because something changed during that time. I think one of the ways that I think is about our health is when we're not taking care of our health, we're not valuing life, right? It's like, if we're not taking care of our own body, we're not valuing life. We're not actually appreciating how fragile life really is. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. I had not lost like anybody close to me or anything to that point in my life. And watching him go through that, something just changed. And it wasn't instant, but it definitely changed. And I had started kind of working out a little bit prior to that. And a little bit in the kind of months leading up to that, but not a lot. And then when that happened with him, I just started pouring all of the emotions that I had from those workout or from that experience with him. I started pouring all of those emotions into working out. Like, I remember so many times running hill sprints and just crying, like just working out emotions. And so it became, going through that experience with him changed me in all kinds of ways. And so that really changed my path. So one of the ways was I had for years been wanting to do something different. Like I just wasn't digging the fidelity thing. And it was one of those things. It was like, so many people in office jobs or in all kinds of jobs, they get stuck. They think like, they want to do something else. They start hating their job, but they don't ever like do anything to really switch careers, to switch jobs. They just get stuck. And there were so many people at Fidelity like that. I saw people that were there for 10 or 20 years and they acted like they hated it the whole time. And it's like, and I had kind of gotten into that point where I was like, I didn't really want to go in every day. I was just not digging it. And so I wanted to do something else, but I never had that like oomph to go for it. And when that happened with my son, that was it. I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to do something I hate and go away from my family every day to something that I don't even like doing. Right. So then shortly after that, I went back for a little bit after he was out of the ICU. I went back for a little bit, but then I quit and I started the marketing company and I did digital marketing for about 8 years or so. And that was great. I mean, I worked from home. I was, with the kids all the time, with my wife all the time, going into their school. It was great, and it was like starting any business. It was, there were some ups and downs and it was a challenge, but it was great. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. So that was about, 17 years or so. During that 17 years, I kind of went through this process where, like I said, up until about 2006, my health was progressively pretty much getting worse and worse in every way. I mean, my mental health, my physical health, my sexual health, all of it was getting worse and worse, and then when that happened with my son, Andrew, that kind of flipped the switch. Right. And things started getting better and better. And I started kind of figuring out things. Like at first it was really externally focused. It was like, okay, I just want to lose some weight. And then I started getting healthier and healthier and started doing different kinds of fitness training and focusing on nutrition. And then I eventually kind of learned about sexual health. And so over the course of the 8, 9, 10 years since then, it's actually been, I guess, 14 years. My son's 14. So over the course of about the first 10 or 11 of those, I just was working through stuff in my own life. So all the things that I coach on now and that I teach men are all things that I struggled with. Like my sexual health sucked. My physical health sucked. My mental health sucked. There was a period of time where I ate McDonald's literally every day, like every single day, in addition to the other food that I ate. So everything that I coach.
You told me a story. I'll never forget this. 7-Eleven was a stop and you would go on the way to work or something and get like chili dogs. And then you would stop at Taco Bell and get like cinnamon churros or something like that.
Close. Yeah. I mean, there were a number of days when I was at Fidelity where, I got all kinds of shit for breakfast that should not be eaten. Right. It shouldn't be eaten at all. And it certainly shouldn't be eaten ever. But it certainly shouldn't be eaten for breakfast. And yeah, there were a number of days where I got a chili dog from 7-Eleven for breakfast. And it's like, first of all, getting a hot dog from 7-Eleven with chili on it is not something I would ever put in my body under any circumstances now at all, but let alone like starting the day. I mean, it would be like at 6:30 in the morning, like 7 o'clock in the morning. Why does 7-Eleven even sell hot dogs at 7 o'clock in the morning? I don't know. I guess because there's people like the way I used to be that buy them. But yeah. And then I would stop at Taco Bell. There was a Taco Bell on the way home to our house. And I would stop at Taco Bell and get a caramel apple empanada, which is like this frozen taco thing. And I would take it home and I would put like 2, 3, 4 scoops of ice cream and then cover the whole thing with caramel syrup. And I kid you not, there was a period of like, I'm kind of a creature of habits, which now I'm in a lot of good habits. And I think there's so much power in habit, but there's so much power in bad habits. And for a while, there was a good 2, 3, 4 month period where 6 nights a week I was doing the Taco Bell caramel apple empanada thing. So, so, I've been on both sides of it. I've been an alcoholic. Everything that I coach on, I've been completely on the other side of that. So over the course of, kind of that decade plus, I was like working through my own journey. I was, figuring out how to be healthy. And I just kind of took it a piece at a time. It was like, I'd figured out a little thing here and there. And like, at first it was kind of just, okay, I'm losing some weight, getting a little better shape. And then I started to figure out fitness kind of more and started to figure out really nutrition and and avoiding toxins and some of these things. And then I kind of figured out the sexual health thing. And then I overcame becoming being an alcoholic. So I just kind of went through all these things and eventually got to this point where, where I kind of felt like I brought it all together. It was like, okay, I kind of figured out the different pieces, I feel like, of being healthy. And I still had the marketing company. But I knew there was just something inside of me that knew that I had to like teach people. It was, I think it's a pretty common human experience when we go through like a major transformation that makes us feel a lot better. We learn something really powerful. We grow in some way. I think there's a natural human inclination to want to share that. It's like, if I experience this really awesome thing, I think most humans are like, hey, I want you to experience this awesome thing like I did, and I mean, you felt that, right?
And it's one thing to be able to go through life and not have any blemishes on your record and everything just kind of works out smoothly. To get advice from that person, sure, that's great. But what you provide is like, listen, I have been there. I've walked that walk. I understand what you're going through right now, because a couple of years ago, I was going through the same muck in my life and kind of trudging through, one, not feeling like I had any sense of purpose or direction. And then two, really having some really bad habits that I had to overcome to get to where I am right now. One thing I love about you is, especially listening to your podcast, is you've tried everything. You're like, here's what magnesium will do for your body. This is what ashwagandha will do for your body. This is what, a coffee enema will do for you. If you take apple empanadas and, rub them on your balls, this is what it's going to do for you. But you've tried all that shit. And you can honestly say, like, I've gone through the experience of trying to isolate this situation. And this is what it does for my body. This is the good things that it did. These are the bad things that it did. And this is what I can show to you from experience. That really resonated with me. It's not like you're citing research. You were the research. You did it yourself.
Yeah.
So during that journey, you mentioned, you were like, I'm going to try all these different things out. I'm going to learn a little bit about it, but I'm going to be the test subject, and I'll let you know exactly how I felt that I could help other people that are challenged in that same way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. I've been my own personal guinea pig for a decade plus. I mean, I've every supplement you can imagine. Different styles of eating. I mean, I've been everything from a fruitarian to a vegetarian and vegan, a pescatarian. I mean, I've eaten and I'm talking like multiple months long tests of different types of eating like that. Like I said, every supplement you can imagine, different types of physical training, I mean, now, like for any of the guys who see me, stuff that you see me post on social, I do a lot of body weight stuff. I do a lot of push-ups and pull-ups and some of the stuff that I teach guys now that I've kind of found my way to, resistance bands and kettlebells and whatever. But like when I first started, I was really into running. I was working my way up towards running ultra marathons for a while. So I was like real into distance running. So I've tried different kinds of fitness, different kinds of food, every supplement you can imagine. With the sexual health stuff, I mean, tons of like exploration and testing there and just seeing how. So yeah, man, I mean, it's been a continual journey. And that's, one of the things that has been true with me is people who are coaches, some people just go out with this mindset of like, okay, I want to be a coach. So I'm going to learn this thing so I can be a coach. Right. And that was completely not what I was just living my life. I had no intention of doing any of this ever, but it just eventually got to a point where like I would be at the climbing gym and I'd have people like asking me, and I'd like be basically coaching friends at the climbing gym, and people would ask me, they'd be like, are you a coach? And I'd be like, no, I have a marketing company. And like, it never really, like, it started to reach a point where it just didn't really feel right, and I still was never, kind of like back when Fidelity, I needed something to help me kind of take that leap, and really go for it. And especially with this, where it's obviously I'm putting myself out there a lot more than I ever did in my life previous to that. And I'm sure that, starting your podcast and doing this, like that's a hump to kind of get over. And I just, I had a good couple of years where I was still in the marketing thing, but it wasn't feeling it. And I was feeling like I should be coaching, but I never really had the balls, frankly, to go for it. And then I got divorced. And when my divorce happened, it caused me to go on this, I did a lot of inner work and just like really diving inside myself and figuring out who I was and what I wanted out of life. And I mean, you've been through divorce, like, that this, it causes you to start to question and try to understand a lot of what's happening in your life. Like, we have these identities, right? Like, I am this, like a lot of people associated with their job, right? Like I'm a firefighter, Absolutely. Right? I'm a whatever, right? And I'm a principal, and so like, well, I had these hats, right? Like I'm, I have a digital marketing company. I have, I'm a father, I'm a husband, right? All of a sudden I wasn't a husband anymore. And of course I'm always a father, but half the time in terms of like actually having them, right? I wasn't anymore. And then the marketing company didn't feel right. So it was like all the things that I had kind of associated in my mind for like, this is kind of who I am for years, they all started either falling apart or getting pulled away. And so I went on this kind of inner journey of figuring out, okay, like when I take away that stuff, like what's left? Who really am I? What do I really want? And anyway, as part of that whole process, that's when I finally realized, like, okay, if I don't teach people the stuff that I've learned over the last decade and like help people get from point A to point B faster and easier than I did, I'm going to regret it forever. Like I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And I finally got to a point where I was like, okay, I don't want to be laying on my deathbed regretting that I never did this. So again, I needed something to kind of push me over that edge. It's like, that thing with my son kind of pushed me over the edge to leave the corporate world. And then my divorce kind of pushed me over the edge to say, okay, I'm going to create what I want with my life. And so that's what finally got me, starting the podcast and getting into coaching. And it's been amazing, man. I mean, I feel so fortunate to be doing what I 100% in my heart believe I was meant to do. Like, I believe that this is what I was meant to do. And that so much of the journey, like I look back at my personal journey, and you probably see this too. I think as the years go on, we start to see why things happen the way that they happened. And I think things happen for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. A lot of times we don't see it at the time, but I started to see a lot of the things that happened in my health, in my personal life, in my whole journey. A lot of the things I think that happened for a reason, because they needed to lead me to a point where I could do what I was meant to do, which is what I'm doing now, which is awesome, which is a good feeling. So,
and I look back, I listened to the podcast. I started listening to your podcast, I want to say in like September, October of 2019, right around that time frame. And there were two episodes that stuck with me. One was the episode when you talked about your son that you just mentioned. That one, it was the first episode that you did. I want to say it was in the 20s, like number 29 or something like that, where you were like, I'm going to talk about my situation, my personal experience. You had this level of vulnerability during that specific episode. You got choked up during it as well, but it was like I felt this immediate connection to you after listening to that. And then one was about your purpose in life. And I remember I scheduled a coaching call with you. It was on my birthday. I turned 42, and it was so it was December 2nd of 2019. I scheduled a coaching call with you. I still remember I was sitting in my car and it was snowing like crazy on my birthday. And we talked for like, you said, I'll schedule like a, 20-minute call. We wound up talking for like an hour. And I felt like I knew you, and I just bore my guts to you. I was like, here it is. This is everything that's going on with you. This is why I feel like I'm stuck in life. And so we had this connection from that point. And I'll fast forward to April. So it was right around this time of 2020 now. So a year ago. And I was at this lost state. I remember the conversation that we had and some of the things that we talked about. And I talk about it often on the podcast. I was just in this lost state and this feeling where I didn't know why I was here anymore. I wasn't a principal anymore. So that part of my identity wasn't there. I was, in the middle of a separation. I was leading to a divorce. And so it was just, I wasn't sure where I was headed. A risk that I took professionally didn't really pan out. And I was just like, what am I doing on this planet anymore? Like there were thoughts that were really dark and negative. Yeah. And I turned on your podcast. I had been listening to sports on the podcast for a while. I kind of abandoned listening to the podcasts, anything self-help wise. And I pulled up your podcast. You were talking about a boot camp that you were going to be holding, in the middle or end of April. And I was just like, maybe this was I don't know, like a sign that I needed, something that I just needed to push me. I'd gotten to a really bad spot, mentally, emotionally, physically, especially, where I put on a ton of weight during quarantine. And I remember I shot you an email and I said, is there any room left in this boot camp? You're like, yeah, bro, jump on in, catch up. And so it was, I want to say it was like April 24th, 25th of 2020. That was the time that I was like, okay, starting now, I'm going to be a different person moving forward. And so talk to us a little bit about that boot camp that you did. It was a 30-day boot camp that you did. What was that all about?
Yeah, man. Boot camp. That was, I'm so glad that you're a part of that first time. So that first time that I did boot camp, I literally did it. I did it live. So I was like, I think, like I've seen in a couple of other instances in my life, sometimes I need a little push. We all do sometimes. We all need a little push to get over the hump, right? Yeah. So I had been thinking for a while about okay, I need to put sort of a training program together, and I hadn't decided exactly what to do. And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to do it this boot camp style. And what I decided was, I'm just going to do it live. I'm going to let people sign up, even though all the videos aren't done yet. And I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take the next 30 days. And it was a 30-day boot camp, right? And so I just decided, okay, I'm going to take the next 30 days and we're going to make this happen. So yeah, we got that first group of guys going through boot camp, and that month was kind of crazy, just knowing that I needed to get those done every single day. But it was amazing. I mean, boot camp has been, the basics, just to, I guess, catch people up. Boot camp, there's 5 areas that I talk about on my podcast, which are fitness, nutrition, hormones, sex, and mind. And those are kind of the 5 pillars of power that I sort of look at when it comes to our health and our wellness, right, as a man. And so boot camp was basically, the idea behind boot camp was really about habits, right? Part of it was about knowledge, but largely it's about habits, because I'm a huge believer in the power of, habits determine the course of our life, and you knew this from when you started gaining weight in quarantine and you were in terrible physical shape coming into boot camp. Why was that? That was because of your habits, right? And so what boot camp was really about is, my idea with it was not okay, let's see how hard we can go for 30 days. It was, okay, let's see in 30 days, how much can we change habits? What kind of habit foundation can we put in place across those 5 areas, right? And so that was what it was all about. The first I broke it down into 5-day chunks. So the first 5 days I call the foundation. And then in the next 25 days, we take 5 days each and go through each of those 5 areas: fitness, nutrition, hormones, sex, and mind. And we basically, over the course of the 30 days, we built habits. We started with some initial, basic habits in that foundation. And then we just sort of build a day at a time. And it's been amazing. It's been amazing. There's been so many guys who have really, really transformed. It's been exactly what I hoped for, which is, I hear from guys who've gone through it who don't say, man, look what I did in 30 days. They say, man, look where I am 6 months later. Look where I am a year later. It changed habits, and it changed the way that people were living, which is amazing. That's exactly what I was trying to go for. So I know you can tell me a little about your experience with it, but I know for you, that changed a lot of your habits for sure, and changed the course of your health and wellness.
Absolutely. And that's what I needed. I needed to feel a part of something that it felt to me like a community that was sustainable moving forward. And the initial connection I felt with you, I was like, you know what, this just felt right to me to sign up for it. So I remember I was like, I'm going to push all my chips in. I'm not going to half-ass this at all. Whatever you're asking us to do, I'm going to do it with fidelity, and I'm going to do it as hard as I can. And so there were these daily things. It was, meditation was a part of it. Your consuming water was a part of it. There was physical activity that we downloaded a Tally app, and we had to put in how many push-ups we were doing every day, how many squats we were doing every day, different cardiovascular type things that we're doing on a regular basis, even our eating habits. So I just started to learn these different things. So I kind of knew a lot of them, but putting them all together in one spot in a way that felt attainable, but also there was this accountability piece as well, where we had to post our results. And that just made me realize, like, it's easy to let yourself down. I've talked about this before on my podcast. It's really easy to let yourself down, but when there are other people looking towards you to kind of help them and motivate them, it's a lot harder to look at you and say, look, I fucked up, Steven. I didn't do my shit today. Or like the other guys that were part of the program. So I felt this level of accountability towards them. And as soon as after I got through the program, I started to see some changes. I started to see momentum started to build. And you ran the program again. And I was like, I'm going to jump in for the next 60 days. That's my brother joined in on that second 60 day round two. And I just continued building on the things that I was doing. Where I started, my push-up volume. There was a day I told you, I'm like, listen, I'm going to do 1,000 push-ups today. You're like, all right, bro, let's do it. Let's do that too. And it just became, the habit part was, we were absolutely spot on. There's been some things that I've slipped up with over the past year, but for the most part, the drinking water, the daily physical activity, the meditation, even just journaling my thoughts and things like that have become part of what I'm doing on a regular basis. My eating window, I'm trying to keep within a certain period of time, but it's been cold showers. Again, just things that you put in place. I was able to kind of sustain them through the course of a year. My brother told me, I was like, how is it, when do I consider just what I do now? Is it after 3 months? Is it after 6 months where I don't have to worry about? He's like, a year. You got to do it for a year, then. I was like, fuck, a year? He's like, you have to go through every season. You have to go through every holiday. You have to go through all this shit and still be able to do it. Then you could say it's just part of your lifestyle. So this is a year now. And I could honestly say that just became part of who I am moving forward, that this will be me. I'll adjust little things along the way, but for the most part, this is who I am now, thanks to going through this journey with you. So having not gone through that, I don't think I would be in the same spot I am right now. And you mentioned everything kind of working holistically together. That's what I have seen has been the most impactful part, is recognizing it's not just the physical, it's not just the spiritual. Everything you have to consider everything at the same time. I think the physical comes first. I feel like you have to, like you mentioned, putting the boot camp out there, you have to put the car in motion. You have to make the movement first, the action, and then everything else will catch up. So the physical piece has to come first, but it all has to work together eventually.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally, man. That was finally why I created the Holistic Alpha. That's what Holistic Alpha means, right? It's like the idea is like, okay, how can we be the best men that we can be? But we need to look at the whole picture. Like as I went through my journey, I had times where, to give you an idea, there was a time when I would buy like a box of wine and like one of those like boxes that had like 4 or 5 glasses in it, like one of those like cheap ones, and I would drink wine and then run hill sprints. And so like, I obviously had like, I had the physical part kind of figured out, but like, if I'm drinking wine before I'm running sprints, like that's clearly a sign that there was some other stuff going on. Right. And so going through my journey, it was like, I had these times where it was like, okay, I figured out fitness, but man, I'm still not where I want to be. I'm not feeling how I want to feel. I'm not accomplishing what I want to accomplish. And so it was like, I started to kind of put pieces together. It was like, okay, then I figured out kind of the sexual piece. It's like, if guys are, one example that I think is so powerful of why we need to look at the whole picture is the way that I sometimes describe it to guys is our like life force, our chi, our life force energy is like this bucket. We have this bucket that's like full of our life force energy. And we have different things that we can do to add things to that bucket. But then we also have holes in the bottom of the bucket where it leaks out. And it's like, if you have a big enough hole in the bottom of the bucket, it doesn't matter what you do to try to fill it up. It's still not going to be full because it's all going to be draining out. Right. And that's kind of the real idea of the way that I coach now. It's like, let's solidify let's plug all the different holes in the bottom of the bucket. And then let's get a number of different things that are all adding power to the top of the bucket. And then the whole situation changes. So like one of the things that I run into with guys is the sexual piece, right? Like if you're, if a guy is like masturbating and ejaculating on a daily basis, it doesn't matter what you do to try to fill up that bucket with other stuff. You can go out and work out all you want, eat right, whatever. You're still going to be a shadow of what you could be if you got that part of your life figured out. So yeah, man, that was really the idea behind boot camp. And that's really the idea behind what I do overall is like, okay, let's take these different areas and let's, in terms of boot camp, especially, it was like, okay, what are the keys? What are the key things that we need to do in each of these areas? Because then when you do the right little key things, then the whole situation changes. That bucket situation changes. Like you don't need to figure out one thing that's going to add all this power to your bucket. What you need to do is just plug the little holes, right? And have a few different little things that are kind of adding power, the right little things in different areas. And then all of a sudden the whole situation changes. And I know that was like, your experience, I think, and that's been the experience of a lot of guys that have gone through boot camp. A lot of guys that have put stuff into action from the podcast. Like I get messages on a regular basis, which I love, guys who listen to the podcast that I've never talked to on a coaching call, who just put stuff into action on their own. And they'll message me like 6 months later and they'll be like, dude, my whole life changed. Like when you start doing little things right in all the different areas, that's when it really adds up. Like you got to solidify the different areas.
And it can't, when you're doing the little things, it's tough to see them as you're putting the little things in place. But it's after a couple months when you step back and say, wow, I was able to accomplish all of these things because of these little things that I'm doing on a regular basis. You and I have had several conversations in the sexual realm just about what we both see with guys is just this addiction to pornography too. I've talked about it too, like this buffer where it's something that's replacing feeling into a specific emotion or experiencing life on a full level, where they're replacing this visual stimulation that they're seeing via YouPorn or PornTube or whatever it is, with actually experiencing a relationship in their life. So that's one thing that you talk about as well. The other thing that you do a really nice job with is you provide a space. There's so many people out there that are thinking about these things, but no one is talking about it. It's really tough to talk about like yourself saying, I've gone through this, I've done this, I've seen this, I've tried this. In the realm of sexual health, that a lot of men don't have an avenue to speak about. It's not like you're going out to a bar with your buddy saying, man, I'm watching way too much porn right now. Or right, I jerked off 5 times last week. I feel like shit afterwards.
Yeah.
You're providing a forum for people to hear about those things, and also it normalizes that behavior. Like, I'm not the only one who's going through it. There's this dude who's putting out podcasts that, thousands of people are consuming on a regular basis that are experiencing the same thing that I am as a man as well. So you're providing that forum for people to understand that they're not the only ones that are going through that situation.
Yeah, man, that's so huge. I've had countless coaching calls. Like I offer like basically a free clarity. I call it a clarity call, right? Like one free coaching call where, we get on. That was the call you and I had, right? It was like, I just listen, like, tell me what's going on in your world. Let's figure out a plan. Let's get some clarity and move forward. And I've done so many of those calls, and I cannot tell you the number of times that I've had guys tell me, you're the first person I've ever talked to about this. And it's like, and also guys tell me the same thing with the podcast. Like, if it's good that somebody's finally talking about this stuff, because there's just not, it's tragic really how little it gets talked about, considering how important it is. Like, I have talked to so many guys who their entire life path has been affected, and in some cases derailed, because of sexual stuff, And so it's something that affects, one of the things that I talk about on my podcast is, and this, is it affects everything. It affects everything you do. Like when your sexual energy is messed up and you have habits that are draining that, it affects how you eat. It affects whether you get that workout in. It affects how hard you go in that workout. It affects your confidence. It affects whether you go for that job, whether you ask that girl out, whether like every single thing you do is impacted by your sexual health. And it's so many guys, we just don't talk about it. Guys are not, like you said, guys are not going to hang out with their friends and saying, man, I jerked off 6 times last week. I felt so much shame after every time. And, like guys are not talking about that. So, and I think that, that's honestly been one of the most impactful things. Like when I first started coaching and I first started the podcast, even, I didn't realize, I mean, I knew that sex was a big piece, and I knew that had the difference it made in my life when I kind of got some of that stuff figured out. But I still had in my mind that like fitness and some of these other things were going to be kind of more of what I would focus on, and more of what guys needed. Right. And so over the course of doing the podcast and coaching guys, I've come to discover that some of the things I didn't realize at the beginning would be as important as they turned out to be. Things like meditation, right? Like when I very, very first started the podcast, or I very first started coaching, I was already meditating for a couple of days or a couple of years, a few years at that point every day. And I knew that it made a big difference in my life, but I didn't have it in my mind like, oh, I need to get a lot of guys start meditating. But that's been one of the huge things. Like every coaching call I get on, there's not a coaching call that I get on that we don't talk about meditation, because if you're not understanding how to deal with your mind and how to deal with your emotions and how to find your way to kind of that quieter place, it doesn't matter what else you do. You're not going to feel the way you want to feel. You're not going to get the results you want to get. So it's been an interesting journey to discover that actually some of the things that I didn't really think were that, I knew that they were important, but I didn't think that I would really be coaching on them and teaching them that much, have turned out to be the most important things. So the mental stuff, the sexual stuff has been huge. I mean, I don't, even for a while, I've kind of ramped up a little bit talking more about sexual stuff, but I still talk about all kinds of stuff on the podcast. Yeah. And even though I talk about all kinds of stuff, I would say at least 80% of the calls that I get in terms of new coaching clients and things like that, at least 80% are primarily driven by something in the sexual health realm. It's like guys who are looking for help getting off porn, like, they're getting older, they're having erection problems, like, it's just stuff like that. And so it's clear to me that I wasn't even pushing that. It's not like the whole podcast was like, hey, this is a podcast all about sexual health. That was just one of many things that I talk about. But the vast majority of people who actually came to me for help are come to me still for that reason. I mean, they come sometimes for other reasons too. They just want to lose weight or, whatever. But a lot of guys come for that reason. And it's because it's such a huge impact. And it's something that it lives in guys' heads. It just lives in their own head for decades. Sometimes they don't talk to a single person about it. I mean, I talked to a guy a couple weeks ago, and he was right about my age. I think he was right about 40, and had been masturbating every day since he was like 15, multiple times a day, every day since he was 15, and had never talked to anybody about it. And I asked him, I was like, so how long have you been wanting to quit? Like, how long have you been trying to quit? Right. Like I'm trying to find out about his journey. And he's like, since I was 15 and it had been 25 years. And so it's something that so many guys struggle with, and they don't talk about it, and it feels taboo. And it's like, no, let's bring that shit out here. Let's talk about it. Like, let's talk about the fact that you jerk off every day. Like, you're draining the main source of energy in your body. And so, yeah, it's been a really good experience to just get that out there. And I think it's one of the most important things that we can talk about, because it affects every part of our life.
And you do it in a way where there's not this judgment. So people feel this level where you're not listening to them to kind of, give this like really in-depth information about themselves and putting themselves really out there and being very vulnerable. You're like, hey, bro, like I understand where you're coming from, and I'm here to listen to you. So there's this level of comfort that people feel going to you with their kind of deepest, darkest secrets. Like you mentioned, you're the first person that they've ever talked to about it. So I feel like that's one of the most successful parts of what you do, is that you're able to establish this connection with people and help people feel comfortable and at home, kind of like they're talking to their buddy, but also a therapist who's not going to go and judge them about it. So you're like, listen, your right forearm looks like Popeye. I'm not judging you because of that, but let's try to figure out why it's happening, and like let's replace a positive behavior with that, and let's find some success in doing it. And the meditation piece is huge. I mean, I know I had never meditated before last year at this time. And now like I do it on the Headspace app, and there's like, I meditated for like 6,000 minutes in a year. And so to me, it's like, it's a visual reminder of a daily habit that I put in place that I'm able to kind of replicate and do on a regular basis as well. And I believe that once you start on the journey, like I mentioned, the physical part comes first, but that mental part is what really helps sustain it over the course of time. Understanding that you're going to have times where your mind is telling you something that you're like, listen, I am not my thoughts. I am not the thoughts that are running around in my head. Let me just see them for what they are and let them pass, and understand I can do with them what I choose. That's up to me what I do with those thoughts. Yeah. So that to me was one of the biggest parts. And I still remember, and I don't know if I've talked to the audience about this at all, but after I went through the second round of boot camp, you were like, dude, you killed it during the last 2 months. Like I appreciate everything you did, and you offered a free month of coaching. You're like, whatever you need, whatever you want to work on during this month, whether it be, physical health, mental health, whatever it is, I'll assist you in any way, shape, or form. And I was like, all right, I'll take you up on that. I want to start a podcast. What I want to do. I want to start, like, I have all these thoughts of what I want to do. And you're like, all right, bro, well, let's do this. So you recorded a YouTube video kind of showing me how to download a program, and you set up time, like step by step, on how to get it going. So I would say, I certainly attribute the shift that I made in my physical, emotional, mental health to going through that boot camp, and kind of that push that it gave me, that catalyst. But then the sustainability of it came from the habits that we went through together. But more than anything else, you believed in me and my journey. And it was really a thing for me that you wanted to help me start the podcast up. That was the thing that I always wanted to do. And it sat up there on a shelf, and I just looked at it and admired it. And you're like, hey man, you got this. Like, we'll go through this together. I'll help you along in the process. And you weren't like, all right, now pay me $1,000. You were just like, I see something in you, and you believed in me at a point in my life that I was at a low point that no one believed in me. So to me, I would say you're certainly one of like the most influential people. I'd say one of the top 3 most influential people that I've ever met in my entire life. And we've never even met face to face before. We've done everything, either a phone call or a Zoom meeting or whatever. But without a doubt, without your guidance and your expertise, your belief in me, holding me accountable, I don't think I could have gotten to where I am right now without your support and guidance. So I just wanted to, publicly just sing that praise of you, and just let you know how much I appreciate, you being a part of my journey as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. And I'm honored. I'm honored that I got to play a part in that. And you're 100% right, dude. There was something that I saw, like when you went through that boot camp, it was like, you went all in. It was like, you were so, I knew within like a few weeks of the way that you dove into that. It was like, okay, this is not going to be just like a temporary, I'm going to do this for a month and then I'm going to snap back. Like I could see that you were making major changes, and really that I think in life in general is about uncovering who we really are. It's like peeling away the layers of who we're not. We have all these layers stacked on of, who other people think we are, who we thought we were supposed to be, all these other habits, and all this stuff gets stacked on. And I think the part of growth, or really what growth is peeling away those layers and discovering who we really are. And when you went through boot camp and I saw what you were doing in those couple 3 months after you very first started, as you peeled away those layers, and I saw more of like who you really were, it was like, okay, yeah, man, like I can see that like you're going to run with this, and you have, for sure. So yeah, man, I'm so glad that we crossed paths.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that we're able to do like kind of back-to-back podcasts with each other right now, I think back to when I was listening to your podcast when I first found it, say 2 years ago or so, thinking one day we would do like a home and away series, or where we'd be interviewing each other about our experiences on a podcast together. I wouldn't have believed it. And one thing that you told me was, I'll never forget this, as I was in probably one of my lower points, you're like, you don't look at where you are right now. Like what you're going to do, you're go through all these changes, and there'll be systemic kinds of things that you'll chip away, and you'll build these little habits over the course of time. You'll look back in a year, 2 years, 5 years, and you'll say, wow, like I can't believe how far I was able to come based on these little things that I'm doing on a regular basis. And then also the belief that you start to have in yourself and my level of confidence in every single relationship that I'm showing up to in my life right now. It's just, all those things really helped me shed a lot of that shit that I was wearing, like you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And now I look back to ways that I showed up in my marriage was really unhealthy. And the relationship I have right now is such a positive relationship where like communication is just one of the pillars that we build everything on in my current relationship. And I've just found someone that can help me be the best me. And a lot of it goes back to, things that we talked about. So I just wanted to, again, I truly, truly appreciate that. And, I'm looking forward to how we're going to kind of continue on this journey together, because I don't think that it's over here. I think that we're going to find ways, and we'll talk about it in the future, to collaborate with one another and find ways to, to kind of share our stories, one, how they intersect with each other, but different strengths that we might bring to helping men in the future through our platforms individually and then collaboratively as well.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. I think we're just only scratching the surface. I think both of us individually are only scratching the surface of the impact that we can and will have. And then I think working together too. I mean, one of the things that if we rewind to, a year ago, April, May, June of last year, I guess that was one of the things that I saw a kindred spirit. It was like, as you started to go through your own personal transformation, it wasn't just about that. It was, in the conversations that we had, it came up pretty quickly of like, hey, like, I really want to help other men. And I know, like, coming from your background as a principal and like helping guide and lead people, it became very clear to me how we were very kindred spirits in that regard. And like, we just want to help guys kick ass, and help them be the best that they can be for themselves, for their families, for their kids, for all the people around them. Because one of the things that I've talked about a little bit recently, and I know you and I have talked about in previous conversations, is there's a ripple effect. Like when guys work on themselves, they're not just improving their life, they're improving the life of everyone that they come into contact with, their kids, their spouse, their, business partners, like everybody that you come into contact with, their life is improved when you improve yourself, because you show up in relationships different. You give off a different energetic vibe. One of the things that I've talked about is we create a space, we shine kind of a light, right? So like if you go, let's say that you're the one in your family who, everybody in your family's kind of been, unhealthy and overweight and like just in unhealthy habits. When you go and you change some of those things, all of a sudden the people around you, your family, whoever else, they see you and they say, oh man, they don't consciously think about it necessarily, but on some level they think, man, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. Right. Or like, if that's how he's living, maybe I can live like that. And so I love hearing, I've heard so many stories of that ripple effect, where when guys improve themselves, it's not just them. It ripples out to so many countless people, and people that you haven't even met yet, people that we haven't even met yet, that we're not going to meet for 5 or 10 or 15 years in their life. Their life is going to be positively impacted by the work that we've done on ourselves. And that applies to every guy out there. So that's one of the biggest messages that I try to get across, because I think, we all have self motivations. Like we want to just feel good for ourselves. We want to look good. We want to, whatever. But the vast, vast majority of people, the impact that they have on other people is a bigger motivator. It's a bigger motivator. Like if you think about, the impact you're having on your kids, the impact you're having on your spouse, the impact you're having on all these other people, when it really boils down to it, that becomes a bigger motivator, I think, for people. And so if we really are clear about this fact, like, hey, when you work on yourself, you do this work to improve yourself, you're not just affecting yourself, you're affecting everybody else you come into contact with. And, in the case of you and I, obviously we've kind of ramped that up doing the podcast and actually doing coaching, and that, takes that ripple effect and kind of grows it exponentially. But even if for the guys out there who never do anything like this, who will never coach anybody, who will never, whatever, they're still impacting countless people. So that's one of the things that I love to see. And I saw that so clear in you, in your journey. Like when you went through boot camp, when you worked on yourself, look what that has led to. I mean, not only has it led to you setting a different example for your kids, you setting a different example for your family and your friends. Now it's led to you coaching other men, starting a podcast. Like that all came from your willingness and ability to work on yourself and say, okay, I'm going to be the best that I can be. And now it ripples out, and that helps all these other people be the best that they can be. So I love that. I love that part of it.
The ripple effect. Thank you for saying that. The ripple effect, like I visualize it in the way that it resonates with me, is you're holding this stone in your hand of potential. It's this potential energy that you have right there, but actually taking the stone and throwing it into the water, right? That's the initial stone or rock hitting the water and submerging. That's the journey inward. That's where it has to start with. If you want to make an impact on other people, if you want to have that ripple effect, you have to take that stone of potential, what you want to become, to help other people. And you have to make the move. The physical action of throwing it in, that initial submersion into the water, is you working on yourself, going totally inward, really being honest with you about what's working, what's not working, your struggles, your challenges, being free and vulnerable enough to say, like, these are the things I need to do. And once you can do that, then the ripple is the countless people that it can have an impact on. And I've certainly seen that. I mean, the people that I work with, the men that I'm working with right now, hearing their stories of where they started, say in February, to where they are now, I like nothing to do with any kind of success or financial gain in any way, shape, or form. It's like, this guy that I'm working with, it was in such a bad space, and now he feels like he can go and change the world and start a business and do this. And another guy that I was working with, it was, his father had passed 10 years ago, and every year in March he would go into this funk. And so working with him during that process, helping him do the work, he feels like he's able to conquer in the future. And that's the rewarding part for me, is seeing that conversations that you have with people, believing in people, that they can then believe in themselves in a way that can help them show up in a deeper way for other people, like you just mentioned. To me, that's the most rewarding thing in the world, is seeing other people get better based on one little conversation that you have with them, right?
Yep. Yeah, man. Small hinges open big doors, and sometimes that small hinge can just be a conversation, might be a single coaching call I've had with somebody, right? It might be a single podcast episode that you listen to. And it's also the small daily things, it's the small things that when we align those and we get them dialed in, then everything changes. And that's been so rewarding too, to see that. And I think that for all the guys out there, I mean, I know that as when I was going through some of the years when I was in, a bad place in a lot of ways, it felt so big. It's like, I think a lot of people get in this place where they think, oh, I want to make these changes. I want to feel this different way. I want my life to be different in this particular way. And they see it as this huge unattainable thing, and they think they got to make all these changes at once, or like it's going to be, this huge thing. And so because it seems so big, then they never get going on it. Right. Like there were so many years where getting healthier for me seemed like such a big thing. And when it seems so big, then it becomes overwhelming, and then you just don't do anything. And I think a lot of guys live in that space, whether it's, their health, the way they eat, the sexual stuff, like whatever it is, they think that it's easy to fall into this trap of thinking it's this big giant thing. But you know what? It's not doing big giant things that changes it. It's doing little things and doing them consistently. And when you do little things consistently, all of a sudden you have that experience, like you said, where you look back 6 months later, a year later, and you're like, holy shit, like, look at where I was and look at how much things have changed. And it wasn't because I executed some like giant complex plan, or because I spent, 12 hours a day working on it. It was like, no, you started doing the right key things, and you did them really, really consistently. Right. So, I mean, I'm sure that that's the experience that you had going through boot camp, is like, it's not, and whether it's boot camp, it's coaching people one-on-one, it's whatever, it's not about how big and complex can we get. It's about how simple can we dial it down, and what are the key things that we really need to be doing every day. And you experience going through that when you start doing the right little things. I mean, there was a handful of things, less than 10 things that we implemented in terms of daily habits. And obviously, like, we went through some of the knowledge pieces and through the rest of boot camp. But in terms of the habits, I mean, it's like less than 10 habits. Less than 10 habits can change your life. In fact, less than 10 habits are changing your life right now, good or bad. There's between 2 and 10 daily habits that everybody has that are either dragging them down and things are getting worse and worse, or they're lifting them up and they're getting better and better and better. And when you switch those around, when you cut out the 2, 3, 4 things that are dragging you down and you add the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things that lift you up, all of a sudden, dude, that bucket starts filling up, and it starts filling up. It starts filling up. And a year later, you have that bucket full of life force, and you're like, man, how did this happen? But it's just, it's those daily small things that lead to huge, huge changes. So I guess that's one of the messages that I want to get to whoever's listening to this is, don't let it seem too big. Start focusing on little things. Like, if you're not training physically every day, start doing 5 push-ups a day. Like, it doesn't have to be some huge number, but make sure it's every single day, yep. Right? Like, just dial it back, realize that no matter how big it seems like the challenge is, right? Like, you might be 200 pounds overweight, or it might be a financial thing or a relationship thing or whatever it is. No matter how big that challenge seems, it's not as big as it seems if you just dial it back to what you need to do every single day, those little things. And if you just start taking those little actions, things will change. So
I look at it as, if you're trying to get across a river, you're on one side trying to get across to another side, you're not gonna be able to jump. What you need to do is like slowly build a bridge from one side to the other. And it's not gonna be overnight. It's gonna take you a while to do these little things to get a safe passage across. But once it's there and you've established these things, now you could get to the other side of the river. You can be in a safe spot. And so I'm almost going to say now, you should absolutely trademark this. Less than 10 Things Can Change Your Life by Stephen Mathis. I mean, that's such a great title. I was like, this has to be, your first or second book that you're going to put out there, right?
I guess.
So maybe. Like, less than 10 things that changed my life. All right, I'm going to buy that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's true though, right? I mean, isn't that true?
It is true.
I mean, if you think back to where you were a year and a half ago versus where you are now, I guarantee you, tell me if I'm wrong, but you could not list more than 10 things that you started doing differently that led to that change, right? I mean,
I could off the top of my head, I could list them right now, and it's going to be less than 10. It's going to be drinking water consistently, about a gallon of water every single day. It's going to be a consistent wake up schedule, like getting up at a specific time every day. Mine's around between 5 and 5:30. It's going to be journaling, putting my intentions out there, and then being grateful for what I have in my life. It's going to be meditation. Mm-hmm. It's going to be cutting down my eating window, and then daily physical activity as far as like some kind of a strength training thing, even if it's body weight, and then sprinting. For me, sprinting has been such a game changer. So I would say those are the 7 things that I would say really changed my life. Those 7 things, and those are things that I've consistently done over the last year and a half of my life.
Yeah, there you go. And then you probably have the other side of it too, where you had a few of the things that you cut out, right? So like those were additions for the most part, right? But then you cut out, drinking alcohol. You cut out like, jerking off to porn or whatever. Like, I don't know how much you want to share in any of that, but like, I mean, there were like 2, 3, 4 things that you cut out.
Yeah.
Those,
morning chili dogs at 7-Eleven.
Right?
Never did that, but like just that like eating shit food. Yeah. I was saying to my girlfriend the other day, I don't remember the last time I had a slice of pizza. I really don't remember the last slice of pizza I had. And pizza was just a thing that I eat on a regular basis. It was Friday night. It was pizza. 4 or 5 slices. That's not a big deal for me. So yeah, you're right. So the 7 things that I added, and there are probably 1 or 2, 3 things that I removed from my daily routine, but it was probably around that 10 number. That's a great point. I believe in that. And in this, it's sustainable if you put your mind to it. So Stephen, let us know, how can people that are listening to this podcast right now, how can we find you? How can we get in touch with you? How can we, figure out a way to work with you in the future?
Check out my podcast. First of all, I know for the guys listening to this, you're going to want to check out my podcast. I would love it if you did. It's Holistic Alpha. You can search on whatever podcast app you're on and find that. I would also love for you to join me for boot camp. Boot camp is something that I'm going to continue doing because it's really, even when guys come to me for one-on-one coaching, boot camp really is the foundation. It's like really taking those 5 areas and saying, okay, like, let's solidify that. And so boot camp, I think every man out there would benefit from boot camp. That's something that I'm going to continue doing, and I'm going to actually continue updating it. So in the next month or so, I'm going to actually be launching basically a new version, kind of boot camp 2.0 for this year. And so when guys sign up for boot camp, they'll get all of the future versions. So like when I do this new boot camp, I'll have you in there. And so, yeah, check out the podcast. You can go to holisticalpha.com to sign up for boot camp. And also, I'll offer it here as well. One of the things that I offer on every single podcast episode is get in touch with me. Like on every podcast episode, I give out my number. I'll give it out here too. It's 801-742-1439. Text me. Any of the guys out there, like, you got questions, things that you think I can help you with, text me or book a clarity call. Clarity call, it's a free call. That's what led, the reason we're on this podcast today, the reason that you, the reason that we've gone on this journey together and that you made the changes you did, it all started with that original clarity call, right? So, so that's the other thing I would say is schedule a clarity call with me. If they go to my podcast episodes, on every episode, there's a link to schedule a clarity call, or guys can go to candidly.com/Stephen Mathis and schedule a call. But, I think for me, everything kind of starts with the podcast. So if guys find their way to my podcast, they'll find their way to the rest of how to work with me and move forward from there. So yeah, search Holistic Alpha, check out the podcast, book a clarity call, and let's chat and go through boot camp, man. I'm excited to do the new version of boot camp. There's some things that, some little tweaks that I'm going to make and change up the format just a little bit to make it even better. As I've gone in the last year or so, having people go through boot camp, it's been great to first of all, see all the changes the guys have made, which has been awesome. Yeah. But I've also learned a little bit more about, okay, like, how can we dial it in a little bit more? How can we make it a little bit more effective? And so I'm going to do a new version. I'm excited to do that. I know it's going to be even more powerful. So yeah, man, that's how people can find me. Awesome. And so what I'll do is I will put all of that in the show notes wherever you are finding this podcast. You can find Stephen Mathis' contact information for Building Men is building.men on Instagram, Building Men Podcast on Facebook. To email me, buildingmencoach@gmail.com. Stephen Mathis, thank you so much, brother, for being on this podcast. Thank you for everything you've done for me over the last year and a half. I was talking about you before. I got a little emotional and choked up just thinking about the journey. And honestly, I can say that you were absolutely one of the most influential people in my entire life. So thank you for believing in me. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Oh yeah, dude. It's my honor. And thanks for kicking ass, man. Like I've been telling you for the last year, you kick ass, bro. So I'm glad that I could play some small part in that. But I'm honored to see where you're going with it, and I'm excited to see all the ass kicking that you're going to be doing and all the guys that you're going to be helping, and looking forward to it. And I'll see you in boot camp whenever that starts up. I will be there. I will absolutely be there. Hell yeah, man. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time on Building Men.